Hey guys, this is another snippet from my Intuitive Eating podcast episode series. And the last time we talked about, or I played you a clip where I was talking about food choices and the satiety index of foods and how they make you full depending on a couple of factors such as fiber content, food volume, protein content, etc. But in this one, I am talking about another one of my favorite concepts, which is one of the more underrated concepts, I think, in nutrition, and that is mindfulness. And by mindfulness, I don't really mean being disciplined or being in some sort of a goal-oriented state or anything like that while you're eating. I simply mean the act of focusing on your food. And while focus is generally being highly appreciated when it comes to things like working or studying, I think when it comes to eating, a few people actually talk about this, which is actually ironic because there are a series of experiments that have confirmed that when people are distracted and are not focused on their actual food while they're eating, but do things like talking to other people or watching TV or YouTube videos or listen to the radio, they actually eat a lot more. And you could even find quotes where people say things such as, I adjust the speed of my eating to the radio show that I'm listening to. So it's a really fascinating topic. And in this episode, I go pretty in depth about how being more mindful and focusing on my food while I'm eating really changed my eating habits and the amount of food that I needed to feel satisfied and satiated pretty drastically. And, it can have great implications in nutrition, definitely, because you will need less food. You will be less likely to overstuff yourself to the point of maybe causing yourself some gastrointestinal issues. But it could even help you outside of nutrition and, just helping you focus more in life in general, which of course can have great benefits in your work life, but even in relationships, being more mindful when you're about to tune out, when you're talking to someone and, get lost in your thoughts when you're actually supposed to hold a conversation with a friend of yours or something. So I hope you will enjoy this episode. This was one of my favorite parts in this entire Intuitive Eating episode series. And with that, let's get into the episode. Okay, next point, which is one of my recent favorites, is mindfulness. And mindfulness in this context refers specifically to how much you're paying attention to the act of eating. And the reason why this is a major thing is because, once again, a series of experiments have shown that people, when they are distracted, will eat more. And not only that, but some experiments even indicated that people actually eat more in subsequent meals. So it looks like whenever you are distracted, be it your TV, a YouTube video, a podcast, or someone just talking to you, you will eat more calories in that meal, and you may even consume more calories in subsequent meals. And one potential mechanism behind this is that you simply become less aware of the amount of food you're consuming once again. So again, your brain registers how well you're being fed based on a variety of sensory inputs. And if you're being distracted by other things, it's basically able to receive less of these signals. So what you want to do to avoid this is just don't turn on your TV while you're eating. Don't mess with your smartphone. Stop the podcast you're listening to. If you've been listening to this podcast while you're eating, stop this podcast now and focus on your actual food when you're eating. Now, I don't want to be a hypocrite, and I want to acknowledge the fact that this is way easier said than done. Because let's face it, eating while watching or listening to something you enjoy is awesome. In fact, it is one of my favorite things to do is listening to something interesting or educational and eat something tasty meal in the meantime. And it was very hard for me to let go of this initially, and I actually tried doing it multiple times and quote unquote relapsed into distracted eating again and again before I actually committed to a more mindful approach. But here is what I can pretty much promise you. It is actually worth it. So yes, listening to a podcast or catching up on your YouTube subscriptions while you're eating your post-workout meal is awesome. But here's what happened to me when I cut all of that stuff out and started to focus on my meal as I was eating it. For one, I was a lot more quickly satiated and actually got very nicely satisfied before I actually got stuffed. I touched on this in the previous episode, but one of the big benefits I noticed when I switched to an ad libitum eating strategy was a great improvement in my gut functioning, and that I had less bloating and things of that nature, while earlier when I was tracking macros and I was being completely distracted by other things as I was eating, because again, when you track your macros, you can get away with these things just fine. I thought that being super bloated and stuffed after every meal was completely normal. And it's actually kind of funny and sad at the same time that after my meals, it always just kind of hit me in the face that, damn it, I did it again. Because I was so distracted during eating that I didn't even notice that I was getting uncomfortably stuffed as I was eating. And now when I'm paying attention to my meals, it's really easy to notice the point where the next bite of food would actually make me feel uncomfortable. Someone commented one time on Facebook somewhere that I like tracking my macros. I can't even imagine how stressful it must be to ask yourself after every bite if you're still hungry. And I can totally understand where this person is coming from, because after eating by the numbers for a long time, it's actually pretty tough to get back in touch with your normal body signals. But there's actually nothing magical about it whatsoever. It's a matter of letting your body do what it knows best, which is giving you the right signals. All you have to do is getting out of its way to do so a little bit. And this brings me to the second point, that by eating mindfully, actually paying attention to the food, enjoying the taste, the textures, and really trying to experience how it makes you feel, there's just an amazing clarity of mind after my meals. Earlier, after I had a huge meal, oftentimes the feeling I got after finishing the meal was akin to waking up from a dream or coming out of some loud disco club or something like that, where I was feeling like having lost touch with reality almost, which sounds super silly and exaggerated, but that's exactly how it really was. It took me a good hour after my meal to actually get back into life, and especially productivity mode. And thirdly, all the things that I just mentioned about more satiety and satisfaction after your meals that research indicates is actually totally true. There's just no other way of saying it. I can tell you that I just feel fuller quicker from less food, and I feel full and satiated longer after my meals. It just simply works. And fourthly, I also mentioned this in the previous episode, is that being able to stay present and having your thoughts fixated periodically on one thing at a time is just an incredible skill that you will benefit from in virtually all situations. Your work productivity will improve, your conversational skills will improve, how you experience joyful events will improve. If you tend to overthink and overanalyze things, that will probably improve. I mean, there's a reason why meditation is so popular to the point of it almost becoming a fad in personal development and entrepreneurial circles, because the ability of clearing your head of needless, excessive thinking is just an incredible skill that is becoming harder and harder to cultivate in the fast-paced environment that we live in. Funny thing is that I actually relapsed, quote unquote, into listening to podcasts while I was eating. I kind of just thought that, well, I now have such good habits and skills surrounding this stuff that now I can just afford this. But a lot of the negatives that I experienced before came back so quickly that I quickly decided that, I'll just go back to mindfulness, and I'm loving it once more. So the podcasts remain for me for the times when I'm commuting or I'm at the gym. Now, I want to note that there are degrees to all of this, and it all moves on a spectrum. So paying attention to your food and to the act of eating, almost in a meditative sense, is probably the best and unbeatable. Then still paying attention to your food for the most part, or at least looking at it, but kind of daydreaming in the meanwhile, is a little more distracted, but it's still pretty mindful compared to what the average person is doing. And then even when you're distracted, there are degrees to it. So listening to a podcast is probably less distracting than actually watching a video. And watching a video is definitely less distracting than actively web surfing while you're eating. So that would be mindfulness. And now I would like to touch on a few other things. All right, guys. So once again, I hope that you enjoyed this little snippet. Well, like I said, I will be releasing a couple of these over the course of the next few weeks because, like I said, I think these episodes have been buried undeservedly under my other episodes. I think this is one of my better work. So go ahead and check out the intuitive eating episodes, part 1 and part 2. I think you will find them valuable if you haven't seen them already. And if you have seen them or heard them rather already, then I think this was a good refresher. So let me know what you thought of this, and see you in the next episode. Hey guys, I just want to tell you again that your inputs for this podcast will help it grow more than anything, and your requests, ideas, and comments will contribute to awesome content going live on this channel and podcast more than anything. So if you want to contribute, the best thing you can do is to go on Facebook and look up Sustainable Self-Development. You'll find both the page and the Facebook group that is dedicated to discussions and ideas being thrown around.
Go there and note down your comments about what kinds of topics or guests you want to be featured on this podcast and YouTube channel in the future. Just keep in mind the general theme of this podcast and my YouTube channel, which is to help people becoming their best selves in terms of lifestyle as it pertains to fitness and general personal development. This podcast is really dedicated to self-improvement, both physically and mentally. So keep that in mind. So thanks again for tuning in, and see you next time.